I want to call it a war on terrorism, but a war on hate, that we can try to cut this off right now so the children that I have one day don't have to see any of the devastation, any of the terror that we've had to go through this week in this country ever again. And I think a lot of young men that are sitting in this audience would hopefully want to say the same things.
Yeah, a lot of them did a little earlier to us. Congressman Nadler, there's no reason to think right now that there is need to reinstitute the draft, but that could come up possibly later.
I would doubt that, but we don't really know. I would hope not. I've never liked the draft, but we don't know. We have restructured our armed forces since the Vietnam War so that for any real conflict, you have to call up reserves. They're integral to the armed forces. We saw that in the Persian Gulf situation. But we're far from having to institute the draft. That would call for, you wouldn't have to do that unless you had a really major land war, which I don't think anybody either wants or anticipates.
Congressman Reynolds, you agree?
I don't see the draft being a factor of being called up into play at this point. I think we need to give the President time as our Commander-in-Chief to move forward on the military buildup, calling of reservists that has occurred today. And we need to just support getting to that military buildup so that the President is ready to go do the retaliation on those terrorists who caused this destruction to our country, of our people, and our buildings.
But I think it's important to say, if I can jump in here, the question isn't simply retaliation. If it's simply retaliation, the way we did a few years back, we sent some cruise missiles to Afghanistan into a pharmaceutical factory in Sudan, that's ineffectual. It would invite further violence against us. This is far more serious. We have been attacked in a very serious way, and our response has to be to destroy the ability of the groups to attack us again. And that's going to take effort, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take our allies as well.
Jeff in the audience, you want to respond?
Bobby?
Yeah. Oh, let me go to Jeff first. Go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing I haven't heard anybody say is that these people have awoken a sleeping giant, and that giant is not going to go back to sleep until whatever needs to be done is done and terrorism is taken out of this country and the world needs to join this giant in getting to the problem and eliminating the problem.
It's very interesting that you said that, because on the floor of the House yesterday, the day before, I quoted Admiral Yamamoto, who was the Japanese commander of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and he was quoted as saying afterward, I think the exact quote was, I fear that all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. And I think that's the situation now.
Bobby, can I get in here?
Yes, go ahead.
Just two sets of comments. One is I've seen running across the bottom so many comments about World War III. And I don't think this is World War III. Remember, the balance of forces then was so different. There was a mighty Germany and a mighty Japan, and huge competition for control of Europe and control of the Pacific, and a mightier United States. And so we fought a world war. I believe that the world is very different today, and the United States has a very different standing among the nations of the world. And this scourge, as grotesque as it is, this scourge of terrorism, is really a phenomena that can be isolated and I believe dealt some serious blows. But I do think that from the discussions I've had with people in the Department of State, that a very thoughtful approach is being worked through. Understand from what we're hearing now, it took these individuals years of planning to do what they did. I believe that the resolve of the United States is great and the resolve of our allies is great. And I believe that if we approach this as we approached, for example, the situation with Kuwait, the President will make his case. Certainly the country will be with him. But I believe we can build a near unanimous coalition throughout the world. And if we do that, and we take the time to do this right, I think that we can deal this problem, this scourge of terrorism, a huge blow, and in fact succeed without a draft without the kind of fear and trauma that many Americans are afraid of and are expressing themselves in,
I
of a
understand.
kind of world war.
Hope you're right. Let me do a couple of emails here. Richard in California, please set up a fund where people across the country can contribute to the rebuilding of the WTC. Many of us would like to be able to contribute a small amount just so we can be a part of it being rebuilt and maybe just a little taller. Heather in Ontario says, I am a Canadian soldier, and I find myself today playing the song Proud to be an American over and over again. This song depicts the strength and pride of the American people, and I think it's appropriate at this time. God bless you all. Mike is on the phone in Vermont. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, Bobby. One of the things I'd like to comment on is that I really think that the restrictions need to be let up a little bit on law enforcement insofar as the FBI and the CIA insofar as their ability to deal with these individuals. You know, the country prohibits the CIA from participating in assassinations, but yet if you had a sniper on a rooftop shooting at the citizens in New York, you know, obviously one would do what had to be done to eliminate that threat and that situation. I think the same needs to be done with terrorism. Once these people are identified, you do the best you can to deal with them, but if need be, they need to be disposed of.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. There are concerns on the other side of this, Peter.
Well, definitely. I'm from northern New Jersey, and my Uncle Jerry is actually a firefighter working at Ground Zero right now. And when all this took place, obviously everyone placed cell phone calls trying to talk to their loved ones. And my father also works in the city, and I couldn't get to him. And I also couldn't find my mother. Luckily, my father was in Philadelphia. And the thing is, there's a lot of us down here from that area, and we don't know really what we can do. You know, we've been giving blood and trying to do fundraisers and things like that. And I think it's very important that all of us really just get together and try and figure out what we can do.
How do you feel about a response?
Try to make this really simple. The way I feel is that an eye for an eye makes the world blind. We need to be very, very careful in what we do because, I mean, we're a very powerful empire, and we could really set off something very terrible that we all fear. So we need to be very, very careful.
And over here to Martin.
Yeah, one of the things I believe we've forgotten as Americans is what's happened to our entire covert intelligence. I haven't heard a word mentioned today about the lack of funding that we have done for human capital and human intelligence. Not a word has been mentioned. We've neutered the CIA, we neutered the Defense Intelligence, and it's an absolute, should not be a surprise that something was going to happen and we knew nothing about it. We as Americans truly need to come together, as I think we have, and forget all the designations of a black American, Muslim American. We're Americans first and something else after that.
Congressman Reynolds, would you like to address that?
Yeah, the gentleman, I guess in the long-range goal, I'd like to see increased funding for intelligence, something that certainly has been a debate in the past. But we're dealing with a terrorist network throughout the world that is very complex. And we found that 18 individuals were willing to give their life to crash an aircraft into a building to cause the type of destruction they have to our country. And I think the President is preparing us to get ready for what we need to do, as Congressman Nadler said, and what I've said previous, to move forward to eradicate the type of terrorism by radical groups around the world that had the ability to pursue America. And whether it be our country, our embassies, or our military abroad, we've reached the point that we have to go take on the war of this terrorism.
Let me go to the audience.
Can I
go ahead,
say
Congressman.
something here?
Go ahead.
We spend a very, very large amount of money on intelligence. The exact amount is classified, so I can't say, but we spend a very large amount on intelligence. We have not neutered the CIA. That's a myth. I think it is fair to say that we probably have grown somewhat complacent, and we're not spending enough on human intelligence as opposed to electronic and satellite intelligence. That's the easy way. It's certainly easier to have a satellite or to spy on electronic communications than it is to try to infiltrate a terrorist organization and get human beings into it. But clearly that we have to place probably a greater reliance on that than we have been.
Florence in the audience.
This comment is directed toward our learning from history. In the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to lead Holocaust survivor groups between survivors of both perpetrators and victims in 10 different countries. And one of the things that comes out is that they all wish we had not gone along with the policy of appeasement and containment, but had handled the Nazi enemies as soon as it became apparent what they were trying to do. And what I hope we will do is handle this immediately. I'm also a mediator. There is no mediation with people who are irrational and whose goal is to vandalize and vanquish everyone else.
And I want to get Matthew up here to Matthew in the audience also, who had some thoughts earlier. Matthew, you don't wish to disclose what your nationality is. We certainly respect that.
Well, the importance of not disclosing is what people are talking about as far as retaliation. We need to be careful, and we ask our politicians to also be careful in the reaction that we have. To move into Afghanistan, we have to look at the countries that surround them: China, India, Pakistan. All these countries which have nuclear weapons. It's a very sensitive area. We ask that the Army and the politicians be very sensitive to these areas. We can't just move in with our military force. We have to respect other regions. And so calling for possibly other countries from the Middle East, such as Egypt, to get involved in some kind of action. And again, it is right. It's not against an entire country. It's against individuals, and we need to remember that so that more innocent lives are not lost.
Mm-hmm. Can I get in here for a second, Bobby?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of the things I think is important here is that the attack on America was the attack, as Tony Blair said, on the free world and democracy. And what I see our country doing while the President is our Commander-in-Chief is addressing a military buildup to address our national security concerns. We also have had a global discussion by the President and by the Secretary of State with our nations, first our allies, then NATO.
Let me interrupt you just a moment, Congressman. Forgive me, but we want to go to New York, where Mayor Giuliani is holding a press briefing. Let's listen in.
But although this is a very difficult day and a very emotional one, and only the beginning of what we're going to have to go through, I believe that I emerged from it as the Fire Commissioner does, and I'm sure the Speaker and Congressman King, thank you so much for being with us, like you were yesterday and the day before. I think we all emerged with a lot more strength. I think we realized that we have the strength to deal with this, to overcome it, that our fire department will emerge from it stronger, and so will our city. And I think people should be mournful and sorrowful, but they should also be very encouraged that we have tremendous courage in New York, we have tremendous courage in America, and the courage will be there in our generation as it was in prior generations. This is a horrible, horrible tragedy. These were wonderful men. They were the leadership of our fire department. And I'd like the fire commissioner to say a few words. He's a great fire commissioner. He's done more for the fire department than anyone that I can think of. We have fewer fire deaths in New York City than ever before. Our men and women are safer than they've ever been because of his leadership. And one of the things we're blessed with is having him as our fire commissioner right now.
Thank you. This is a question because I couldn't hear anything.
What went through your head as you
Oh, I'm sorry.
looked out at the families and the friends of the deceased?
One of the good things about being a commissioner who comes from the department is that you really know how the department works from bottom to top. One of the horrible things about being from the department is that you know all the people so well. I keep looking at the list of people that are missing, and they're missing, and we're working to rescue them. I keep looking at that list, and I see not just friends that I have, but friends that have sons. I look at a list of a retired captain who's one of the most phenomenal captains we've ever had, John Vigiano, who's missing a son who was on the fire department and a son who was in ESU as a police officer. That is typical of that list that we're working from. It is just horrible. I have never had anything like this to deal with, and I'm sure I never will again. As difficult. But we'll get through it.